Trustees to order. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you all very much. We have quite a few board presentations, but we have one mayoral appointment, so I'm going to turn to the village administrator for that, please.
Good evening, sir. We have one mayoral appointment for today. Resolved, the Board of Trustees approves the hiring of the Cooper's booth attendant at a rate of $18.00 per hour, effective July 23rd, 2024. Emerson Greenwald.
Second.
I'll make the motion, seconded by Trustee Brown. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we'll go on to the board presentations. The first one will be the Lake Agawam Permeable Reactive Barrier, presented by Dr. Chris Gobler of Stony Brook, as well as Dan O'Rourke of CDM Smith. Is Chris, you want to come forward? Or just, are we going to have the other guys go first? You tell me what you would like to do.
Maybe I could give a broad brush stroke over.
Perf, please come to the podium. Yeah, you can stand up. You can stand up. Yeah, thank you.
So Chris Gobler, Stony Brook University, and I guess I'll just give the background. I think that'll be good, and then we'll get the details. But just as background, I think you all know that Lake Agawam's had some serious problems over the years. One of the primary ones being blue-green algae. These things are toxic to humans. Specifically, there's something in there called microcystis that makes microcystin. It's been there for decades. It's a continual problem. It's fueled by excessive levels of nitrogen and to a lesser extent phosphorus, but primarily nitrogen coming from land going into the lake. It's coming from many, many sources. The village has done a very good job over the years at addressing some of those sources. For example, road runoff and diverting some of that. But groundwater is the biggest source of nitrogen into the lake. And, as you all know, the lake is continually filling. Sometimes it has to be let out, and then it fills up again. That's groundwater that's mainly filling it up. And we've done work over the years essentially showing if you add more nitrogen to the lake, the blue-green algae in the lake get both more intense, so denser, and even more toxic. They can make more toxins per cell. The compound they make, this microcystin, is a nitrogen-rich compound. So if you give the cells more nitrogen, they get more toxic. And just as an update, just last week, we saw a bloom of over nearly 1,000 micrograms per liter of microcystis. We monitor dozens of locations. We have done so all year. Since the beginning of the year, we do it all the time. But in 2024, that's the high mark for blue-green algae in the state that we've seen, probably over 300 samples.
And it's in Lake Agawam.
Exactly. So just so perspective, this is I don't want to be too dramatic, but the concept that comes to mind is clear and present danger. So this is something we want to address, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so going back several years, I wrote a proposal that went to New York State that got funding from the state to do a preliminary investigation about putting in a PRB that we're going to hear about. That preliminary investigation essentially looked into what's the concentrations and types of nitrogen coming from the north end of the lake going into Lake Agawam. That grant was then matched by funding from the village and funding from the Lake Agawam Conservancy that really did a full-on study that led to investigation I'm sure we'll hear about momentarily. And then in addition, with the information from that study, I then wrote a CPF grant for the village to put in this permeable reactive barrier, which we're about to hear about. And the whole idea being that it begins to remove the nitrogen from the groundwater before it goes into the lake.
Right.
And of course, sewering is a great idea, and that will come. But this is something that can start having an effect right away, like as soon as the project is set up. And that's the kind of thing that we need. Start working in parallel tracks, long-term planning, short-term actions as well.
Right.
So that's sort of the background. I think we're going to hear more details, but if anybody had any questions on that aspect.
No, we were. I just want to make sure everyone is aware. We're successful in the grant application.
Yes.
And our treasurer is here, Julie. I believe it was almost $400,000. So it's a significant amount of money that we have as a grant.
Yes.
That we will not have to pay for directly.
Exactly.
And that will be used towards this project.
Town CPF funds will fund the entire thing. And this is on top of the commitment that the state made for doing the preliminary research, the village made for some of the preliminary research, and the conservancy made. And that, they put those things together. That was another couple $100,000. So,
and as you said, this goes back several years.
Yes, we've been working on this since 2020 was when we first started working on it.
Very good.
So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chris, very much.
My pleasure.
And now I'll turn it over to Dan, please.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. This is the culmination of the design portion of the Lake Agawam Permeable Reactive Barrier Project. What you see on the screen right now is a photo that I took in March, maybe a year or so ago, and it's of more pleasant conditions where the lake looks blue, it looks clean. You'll see some other photos where that's not the case. This was not done simply by CDM Smith, as Chris just mentioned. It was a collaborative effort between Stony Brook University, the village, and CDM Smith. So, moving forward. So, just a quick four-bullet agenda about what this presentation is going to cover. What is a permeable reactive barrier? Why we chose Lake Agawam? Talk a bit about the project, and lastly about implementation and next steps. So permeable reactive barriers, they've been around for decades. There's nothing new with permeable reactive barriers. A lot of times they've been used at Superfund sites and hazardous waste remediation sites to remove different contaminants from groundwater. Over the last 20 plus years or so, people started looking at permeable reactive barriers to remove nitrate from groundwater. Dating some of the first studies were pilot demonstrations that were done in Massachusetts, which looked at kind of a shallow plume of nitrate entering Waukwut Bay and Childs River. And what those studies focused on, this was Woods Hole as well as Lombardo Associates back in 2005. They essentially dug a small trench at the coastline where groundwater tends to converge, kind of backfilled it with what's called nitrix, which is like a kind of a carbon source. It's like a supplemented mulch, if you will. This one was pretty shallow, like I said, only 6 feet deep, right at the coastline, about 40 to 65 feet long. It worked very well to remove nitrate. There were some other issues associated with it that they learned later, but in terms of due to salt water and so forth, but in terms of nitrate removal, it worked very well. So what is this thing, right? We're putting a carbon source in. Like I mentioned, the Nitrex was like a mulch, wood chip kind of consolidation. So basically what it is a carbon source. If you put carbon inside an aquifer that has very limited carbon, what happens is that the natural microbial community that's in there starts to break down that carbon. When that carbon breaks down, it starts to suck the oxygen out of the groundwater itself. So the bugs, instead of using the oxygen in the groundwater, they pull it off nitrate, which is NO3. So basically what you're doing is you're taking nitrate, removing the oxygen from it, and then that turns to nitrogen gas and just volatilizes into the atmosphere. So the media that's been tested over the last 20 years or so has been varied. We've looked at, or not we, but the community has looked at mulch, Nitrex, Evo, which is emulsified vegetable oil. It all depends on the application. So if these things work so great over the last 20 years, where are they on Long Island? Well, it's not a new technology, but it hasn't really been used in a widespread fashion on Long Island to date. Cornell Cooperative Extension and Stony Brook did maybe, Chris, I think it's one of the first ones, the Hampton Bays Bulkhead PRB. which actually looked at, they had to remove a bulkhead, replace a bulkhead that was all rotted out. And what they did was they put in a brand new bulkhead with these treatment cells in it of different sources of carbon, mulch, wood chips, different kinds of mulch, different kinds of wood chips. And they did an experiment on that. That showed to remove 80 to 100% of the nitrogen of the nitrate entering the bay.
Mm-hmm.
CDM Smith and Cornell Cooperative Extension recently installed just last year, well, a little over a year ago, one at Tanbark Creek, which is located just south of 3 Mile Harbor. Tanbark Creek included a series of injection wells, which injected emulsified vegetable oil into the aquifer. I don't have the preliminary results with me right now, but I will say that it's very promising. We're seeing nitrate removal that's going across that PRB over the last year. We've also been working with Southampton for quite some time with the town to install a PRB right along Flanders Road in Riverside Park, right near the McDonald's that's there. That is still ongoing. There's some issues with county-owned land and so on and so forth that we're working through, but hopefully that will be a third one that we would be able to get in, and this would be the next. These are still pilot demonstrations. Like I said, it's new to Long Island for nitrate removal. We don't want to say all of a sudden that these things work great and just go ahead and install thousands of feet of these things without knowing specifically what they're doing. So far, preliminary results are promising, but still we have a ways to go. Construction techniques for these shallow plumes. The one you can see on the left, what you see is the construction technique in Falmouth. It was only a 6-foot trench, nothing big, nothing major, just use an excavator. Some of these might use one-pass trenching, which is really cool actually, because this machine actually cuts up to 30 to 40 feet into the ground and can dump the mulch and wood chips in as it's going down. Very fast operation, very expensive operation, but again, utilized and effective. You can also use traditional trenching approaches and so on and so forth, but that's all well and good if you're within the first 40 feet of ground surface. You can't open trench something that's 80 feet below the surface. So what do? Shallow, like I said, you would go with a one-pass traditional approach. At deeper plumes, you need to use injection of like emulsified oil. Deeper groundwater, if you see here, this is just a cross-section through Lake Agawam, actually. On the left is north, on the right is south. That blue line you see at the top is the lake level. Those black lines, what you see are actually particle tracks from a numerical groundwater flow model that show that not all the particle tracks are going to discharge immediately at the lakeshore, immediately at the shoreline. So doing something that was, I don't want to call it simple, but something that was maybe less invasive by using that 6-foot trench that Woods Hole did in Massachusetts won't necessarily work here, because you'll get a little bit of the nitrate at the surface, but everything at depth is discharging further off into the lake. So why Lake Agawam? I told you when I opened this presentation that there were times when this lake has not been as good as it looks in that photo in the introductory slide. This is a couple photos I took, and I think this was November of 2021. You can see obviously significant eutrophication going on. The lake is green. It's actually green today, but not as bad as it was at that point. It actually, as you guys know, when that lake drains, if there are algal problems, the beach is closed due to that. The PRB was also, this was all based upon work that Chris and his lab has done at Stony Brook over the years. Chris has been doing a lot of investigations at this lake for some time. He spoke about the microcystis, toxic blue-green algae, and that nitrogen load to the lake is the dominant load from groundwater. This was a PRB was recommended from the harmful algal bloom action plan for Lake Agawam that was completed in 2020. So that kind of sparked the genesis of this project. And like Chris mentioned, we've done this in over the years. The first idea was to install this PRB at the immediate northern shoreline of the lake. right behind the monument to the south there. The monument's to the north. We did some kind of early investigations, and one thing we found was in the exploratory borings at those areas, we weren't really seeing much nitrate within the groundwater, which was kind of surprising. We saw some nitrate at depth, but what you see on the left there is a picture of it's basically silt and clay. So a PRB at that depth wouldn't really do anything because you need sand in order for the injected media to spread out. So as part of that, the next thing we did was the next phase of this project, which we looked at, well, let's put another boring further east into the lot adjacent to Agawam Park. We also looked at nitrogen out of that boring, and surprisingly, this one was the jackpot. We hit anywhere from 6.6 to 11.2 milligrams per liter of nitrate. But one thing you notice is that the elevated concentrations are deep. So we're looking at, anywhere from 40 to 80 feet below surface is really the target zone of where you want to remove the nitrogen. And that's deeper than a trench can do, than an open cut trench, deeper than a one pass. So we decided to go forward with the injection approach. The other thing we did was we conducted a pore water study, and that pore water study, which was conducted by Cornell Cooperative Extension, matched what we're seeing in the wells. We're not seeing much nitrogen right at the shoreline in the northern portion of the wells. However, just to the east, we were seeing elevated nitrate immediately south of where we found the elevated nitrate in the boring on that eastern property. Mm-hmm. So we felt pretty good about moving forward into phase 2, which was kind of to expand that property. Let's see what we really have there. We drilled a series of monitoring wells in 2022, a bunch of what are called nested wells, looking at those depths that we were targeting for the elevated nitrate. Resampled those wells. Those also came back with elevated nitrate. We did a bunch of slug testing to determine how permeable the aquifer is in that area. And we also installed other monitoring wells in a staff gauge for groundwater model calibration, which we were going to use the groundwater model to support the design. So if you guys all went out to this parcel right now, which I did earlier, which is why I'm wet and maybe a little bit muddy, you'll see nothing there, nothing at the surface, right? But you'll notice that there are these kind of curved box covers that are located in that, and those are those wells that we installed. What we saw was dissolved oxygen was in the sweet spot for where we want to do this. Typically, you want dissolved oxygen in the groundwater to be less than 4. So that's a check mark there in all wells that we installed. Nitrogen, similar to the initial results we saw elevated nitrogen at depth. Between 50 to 80 was really where we saw it. Again, too deep for trenching. Injection was recommended. So CDM Smith has been doing groundwater flow modeling on Long Island for 30 years. We've done a number of evaluations. We have an existing South Fork groundwater flow model that we used for a number of studies, SWAP, the most recent subwatersheds plan. So we used that as a framework and modified that groundwater flow model to our study area, incorporating the geology we saw, incorporating the conditions that we saw, the lake bathymetry, all of that stuff. And the idea was really to figure out how to best design this system. What we came up with was install 6 injection well clusters. So if you look at this image to the right, these little red dots are the monitoring wells that we installed. These injection well clusters are not there yet. These are what we simulated in the groundwater flow model. So each one of these clusters has 3 wells, one 50 to 60 feet, one 60 to 70, 70 to 80. We're going to also install 2 extraction wells just to the south. The reason for that is that when we inject this emulsified oil, we have to mix it with water. We can't mix it with distribution potable water because distribution potable water has chlorine in it. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to wipe out whatever bacteria we want to help us break this nitrate down. Mm-hmm. So we're going to install 2 extraction wells, pump the water from the site itself, mix it with the emulsified oil, and inject it over these 6 injection wells. Well, these 6 injection clusters. The extraction wells will be about 6-inch diameter, PVC, 50 to 70 feet below grade, and we'll inject up to 6 wells at a time to keep the thing moving. You know, we don't want to be out there forever, obviously, so we're able to manifold this thing to inject 6 at a time. We think that we can get 6 done in probably an 8 to 10 hour day, depending on field conditions. Like I mentioned, we can't use distribution water. What you see on the image on the top is, it's hard to read the numbers, but this is just basically an output from the groundwater flow model to ensure that we have the spacing properly set and the depths properly set. You can see from that we do get a nice injected concentration of emulsified oil that's continuous around this, thereby developing an effective permeable reactive barrier.
So what's the total width when you've finished all the wells?
Once you're done with all the wells and the injecting, it's going to be about 115 feet end to end, and about 30 feet north to south. By the time the injection takes
And what's
hold.
the distance between the clusters?
Distance between the clusters is about 17 or 18 feet.
And that's close enough that the stuff's gonna
Yes.
migrate out and
That's why
catch
we
the stuff
needed the
in
flow
middle?
model.
Yeah.
You know, that's why we needed the groundwater flow model to test that, to make sure that was the case. At first, I think we started with like 25 feet, and then we kind of shrunk it from there. So
Do you have to keep replacing the emulsified oil as it gets used up?
over time, yes. However, the emulsified oil sticks around for quite some time. So one of the thing that comes out of this isn't set and forget. This is a pilot study. There has to be a long-term monitoring plan associated with this. And that's where Chris's group is going to come in and take on that role to make sure that the barrier is still working, that there's enough carbon source to continue to break down the nitrate. At some point, the study is, like I said, this is still kind of this is a demonstration pilot for Long Island. This has not been done on Long Island in wide fashion, right? There's only been one of these that has been, or 2 of these that have been constructed to date. To be honest with you, we're not totally sure how long it's going to last. Studies in the literature have ranged anywhere from 5 years to 15 years without ever having to regenerate the emulsified oil. So that's part of the program, is to see how long it's going to last, but several years for sure. We're comfortable with that. These are just some of the numbers from the design. In addition to the injection wells, we're going to install a couple more monitoring well clusters just to incorporate into the long-term design. The existing wells that are there are going to be used to make sure that the amendment is spreading appropriately when we're injecting. So as we're injecting, we'll have what's called a bailer, which you just sink down into the well and pull the water out. The emulsified oil is going to be white in color. It'll look like milk. It'll look like skim milk, basically, mixed with a little water. And we want to make sure that we're seeing that distribution as planned. So,
Sorry to keep asking.
no.
This is
That's
fascinating.
totally fine. That's why we're here.
You obviously can't make the well with a pipe, or else the stuff wouldn't mix with the water. So how do you keep the drill hole from just glomming back together again after you drill it?
Well, we're going to drill it using hollow stem auger. So, like a traditional well, and then install the well and then remove the augers. So the well will, and then, develop that well accordingly. So it'll be just like any, there's tens of thousands of monitoring wells on Long Island. It'll just be like any one of those. And the well will have an open screen interval corresponding to a certain zone that we want to target.
Mm-hmm.
So we're basically going to inject that fluid's going to go down the riser. Once it gets to the screen, it's going to go out radially from that well. And then, there's going to be, some trial and error about how we do this, because you don't want to inject too shallow right next to each other at the same time, or you're going to create too much pressure. So you've got to, mix and match and pay attention to how you're doing the injection. We have experience with this at Tanbark Creek. We've, completed that one. It's very similar to what we're doing here.
That's the one in East Hampton?
Yeah, that's the one in East Hampton. So this is kind of what we're thinking. Like I said, 6 wells per event. The injection should be completed within 1 week, plus delivery, setup, breakdown, maybe plus or minus 4 days. So we're targeting 2 weeks from this to start to finish for this injection event. So what you'll see is there'll be a delivery of amendment. The amendment, we're going to need 10 totes. Each tote is 275 gallons. So they're not tiny. We're going to need 10 of those. Then we'll have a temporary fence put up around the work area to keep the public out and keep everybody safe. We're going to have the injection set up. Like I said, should take soup to nuts about 2 weeks to do the injection.
Mm-hmm.
The wells themselves are going to take a little longer because we have so many of them. We're drilling 18 injection wells and 6 monitoring wells. That's probably going to take 6 weeks from start to finish. So, that would obviously go first, and then we would bring Chris's group in to do some sampling for the water quality. And then you do because we need a baseline to compare to, then we would do the injection from there. So all in all, if everything goes according to plan, you're looking at about 10 weeks start to finish. What is this emulsified oil? It's vegetable oil based. It's a food grade additive. It's not anything toxic. It's not anything that's going to create any issues whatsoever. In terms of, we're not injecting anything it's not a chemical, essentially. It's a vegetable oil, food grade based solution. Milky white in color. It is USDA certified, bio-based product. Like I said before, this is the same amendment we used at East Hampton. It worked very well. Kind of went over this a little bit already, the timeline, the sequence of activities. This is just kind of, a schematic on the bottom of what this is going to look like. We're going to have water coming in from the extraction wells to mix the emulsified oil solution. And then that's going to go out to a manifold where it's going to be injected into the wells. At the end of the day, we're going to restore the site. It's going to look just like it does today, and implement the long-term monitoring program. So that was a question that I got a lot of is, well, what's this thing going to look like after all said and done? Go out and look at it now. It's going to look exactly like that. You're not going to see anything sticking up. There's going to be no extrusions or anything from the ground surface.
How often do you have to refresh the solution?
Well, that's like what we had talked about before is, in the literature, it's anywhere, there's a huge range, 5 years to 15 years, depending on site conditions. That's why the monitoring program is important, because we want to make sure that we are monitoring that and to notice when breakthrough happens. That's when essentially the carbon has been used up. But the beauty of using injection wells is you don't have to reinstall the wells. You just come back, have those guys swing in, re-inject, and they're on their way. And that's it. You don't have to trench again. You don't have to, because when you're dealing with a trench, trenches are great because they're shallow and they're relatively easy. But at the same time, once that carbon runs out, you've got to install another trench. You're basically starting from scratch. So that's basically what I had today.
Thank you very much. Ed or Len, do you have any questions?
I had one more.
Sure.
Roy has all the questions today.
You mentioned that this hasn't been done much on Long Island. Is there another technology that has been done on Long Island? And if so, what is it? And why are you choosing this as opposed to the one that other people have done? Maybe there is no other technology.
For nitrate removal, this hasn't been done. Like I said, I think, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, please. The Hampton Bays bulkhead PRB has been complete and in operation. The Tanbark Creek PRB is complete in operation. I don't know of another one on Long Island.
But you said Riverside might be proposed.
We've been working on Riverside for like 6 years. There's a lot of red tape associated with Riverside, but that one hopefully will go forward. And that would be one where we do a different methodology, but Riverside is shallow. Riverside has there's a clay layer at 30 feet and all the nitrate is actually above that clay layer.
Wow.
So that one is going to be different. We originally wanted to use the one, because that's similar. We have a grant for that as well. But we wanted to originally use the one pass trenching, But as I'm sure you guys are well aware, costs went crazy when COVID hit, including the one pass trencher. So we were unable to do that.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at alternate methodologies to install that one. But that's going to be wood chip based. That's going to be different because we can get away with wood chip based on that one because it's so shallow.
Right.
So the idea here is to just, and this is something that Chris's group is working on, is we want to evaluate these different technologies, right? I mean, in your case here at Lake Agawam, the nitrate's so deep that there's very limited options other than inject it because it's 50 to 80 feet below the surface. Open cut trenching is not going to work. A one pass trencher is not going to work. So we're looking at.
How does the nitrate get so deep? I mean, most of it is generated by the village business district or by water runoff, and it's got to sink into the soil. So how does it get down 80 feet?
Oh, it sinks.
It's heavier than water.
No, it's not. But it travels with groundwater. So if you go north, the groundwater flow is actually you start to get to what's called a recharge area. In which case, the groundwater flow goes down
And then up again.
travels, and then it comes up to the surface, similar to anywhere on Long Island. If you go, the groundwater is gonna, in say, the middle of the spine of Long Island is the recharge mound. That's where water goes down, and then it comes all the way back up. So that's we see nitrate, hundreds of feet deep in the Magothy. It's just following the path of groundwater. So in Southampton, where you guys get closer to the spine of the South Fork, that's where water's moving down first and then over and out.
Well, I'd like to ask a question. First, thank you for your presentation and being here. We appreciate it. So I just want to be clear. I think what you're saying to us is that this process that you're going to use as a pilot is to try to deter the nitrogen that's coming as the runoff. Groundwater.
Yeah.
So the groundwater and the nitrogen. And what has been the data for the improvement so far? Is that the success of that? Couple of questions. Second one is, so this is not really dealing with the algae blooms at this time. You're really trying to prevent the nitrate from increasing, which therefore will increase the problem of the blooms. So I think you're saying is that you're trying to prevent more invasion of it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. What's the data behind it and the success, the numbers?
Well, let me see. Let me just figure out where to start. So yeah, it's nitrogen. A large portion of the area is unsewered, right? So you have
That I
septic
understand.
systems, and
Yeah.
that creates nitrogen loading into the groundwater table, which ultimately discharges at the surface waters or a
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're trying to slow that process or prevent that process from continuing
Yes.
in this. Now, this is 115 feet
Mhm.
long, right? It's not going to solve the problem of Lake Agawam, I can tell you that. If it's successful and if there's economies of scale, right? If we find that this PRB is super successful, you can install a longer one. You can look at different methodologies, in theory, I'm not suggesting this. You can run one down Main Street and take out that whole eastern side of the groundwater entering Lake Agawam. As far as data to prove it, we do have the preliminary results of the PRB at Hampton Bays. We have the preliminary results of the PRB at Tanbark Creek. Both are working successfully. Now, they're still pretty new. Data in the literature support that PRBs that were installed using the same approach, same methodology, and this, and also in the wood chip one, are successful.
So I need to, can you send the board the numbers of the data of what you're calling successful? And can you also send us a copy of this lovely presentation?
Of course.
Because that would help me have a comparison and understanding of it. And so the vegetable oil, forgive me if I'm not saying it correctly, what exactly is it going to do for preventing the new runoff of the nitrate?
So what happens is that, think of it like Crisco, right? You know, it's like you pour that and mix it with water. Now put your hand in it and take your hand out. It's going to stick to your hand, right? Vegetable oil is going to stick to your hand. You can see all the beads of vegetable oil. Or what we're doing is we're injecting it into sand. So what it's going to do is it's going to coat the grains of sand with vegetable oil, which is essentially 100% carbon. The microbacteria that are in the aquifer naturally will eat that. When they start eating it, then they pull oxygen out of the water. So
then you can give us a comparison on how that has happened and the data of that from the previous one that you've done.
Yes, now we didn't do microbiological investigation necessarily, but we did do water quality investigations showing nitrate before, nitrate upstream, if you will, of the PRB, and nitrate downstream of the PRB before and after that PRB was installed. And the up gradient upstream nitrate hasn't changed much. The down gradient went down quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
You'll give us those type of numbers.
Yeah, I don't own the data, but I will
the
check
data?
with the town of East Hampton. They've been super cooperative because they're aware that you guys are doing this, and they are totally supportive of it. So as soon as they give me the go ahead to release that data, I would be more than happy to.
Thank you.
Sure.
My next question, as far as the algae bloom that is currently in the lake, is there any improvement or dissolvement that's going to happen from this, or is this just simply deterring more of the runoff that amplifies the problem?
This is literally like a field test to see how this works to remove nitrate. The nitrate's going to continue to go into the lake. We want to stop that, right? So in order to stop that, you can do one of two things. You can sewer.
That I understand.
You can remove. You can upgrade your septic systems with the IA systems that the county is proposing.
Yes.
But with that said, you take that source out, right? That's great, but there's still plumes of nitrate that's still there. That's still going to flush out. That's going to take decades to do that. Now, the PRB, the beautiful thing about that
decades
is
to
flush
remove
the
the
aquifer.
algae
Yes.
blooms.
Decades for nitrate to be removed from the aquifer, yes. Now, I don't know, it's not just nitrate. Chris mentioned there's, other factors that control the bloom. So I don't want
This is fascinating to me, so that's why I have you
no,
here. So I'm going
I
into
find it
these questions.
fascinating as well, but I'm waiting for the hook from Chris to come in and pull me off the chair. So, he can speak more eloquently about the factors that trigger the blooms. What we're looking to do is find a way to prevent nitrogen loading from entering this lake and contributing to the blooms.
Okay.
If this works really well, then we would propose that you guys install a larger one, and so on and so forth. Over time, the idea would be that we're significantly limiting the nitrogen entering the lake.
Okay.
And I'll say that if I could just add to that.
Can you come up?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Just one moment. Let me just be clear on what you said to me. Thank you so much, Doctor. So what you're saying, and this is how I digest things. You're working on preventing more of an invasion, and that's what this is doing. But at this time, this process is not actually attacking the current blooms.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Yes, doctor. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, there's many sources of nitrogen and there's many activities afoot right now. So we mentioned sewering. There's also efforts to upgrade individual septic systems. There's also the algae harvester that there's been $10 million to obtain, which will be yet another approach to both remove nitrogen and phosphorus and directly remove the algae. And frankly, all of these things are needed concurrently because it's a big issue. There's many sources, and so this will just address part of it, and ultimately, hopefully, the results from this inform us in such a way that we can do even more of this. But anyway, point being, there's a lot of things afoot, and so this is one piece, one tool in the toolbox, one piece of the puzzle, along with the sewering, the algae harvester, upgrading the IA systems. and maybe even doing work on sediment that could happen in the future as well. So anyway, I just wanted to add that the complementary parallel piece there. So.
I
Thank
appreciate
you,
it,
Doctor.
sir.
So I look forward to a breakdown of the data that you have as well as this presentation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being so patient with me.
Of course, thank you.
Dr. Goppler probably addressed one of my questions, because what you're doing, you're addressing the plume of nitrates that are coming into but you're not going to the source. And my question was, if you can, since a commercial IA system can reduce the nitrogen load to 3 milligrams per liter, is there any way that we can incentivize the local businesses to put in place the IA systems that fuel the plume in question, and that is being addressed by the proposed PRB?
Well, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The best way to do this is remove the source, right? I mean, like, there's no doubt. I mean, because, like, you can't, this isn't intended to, like, just, like, we don't have to do anything because the PRB is going to save us all. No, that's not it at all.
Right.
Removing the source is going to take some time. This is something that can be done relatively quickly on a large scale as well, if it works well, right? And again, removing the IA systems are going to do wonders for the aquifer system across Suffolk County. Now, what it doesn't do is address fertilization. There is, groundwater moves really slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking times of travel on the order of, 50 plus years to Lake Agawam. 50 years ago, any farms that might have been within the area, that nitrogen that has been loaded onto that parcel might still be in the aquifer, right? So there's nothing you can do about that, except in this case, you would take care of that, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like the equivalent of the old pump and treat systems at any remediation. You go to, you've all heard of the Navy Northrop Grumman plume, I'm sure. Those are using like big water supply wells to, pump and treat, right? Remove the contaminant from the aquifer. This is essentially doing it passively.
Yeah, and you mentioned fertilizer. My other question was fertilizer and wastewater from properties around Lake Agawam enter the lake in a matter of days or weeks, because it's the
Oh, well, yeah,
proximity.
especially if everybody over fertilizes.
Whereas
Yeah.
for more distant areas, it's going to take decades.
Yep.
What can be done also to incentivize the properties to use alternative solutions to chemical fertilizers and install the sewage systems? In your studies and your plans and your work with the New York State, are there ways that we can incentivize property owners to go ahead and eliminate the problem?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Suffolk County Department of Health has been working on that now for 3 years, right? I mean, with the subwatersheds wastewater plan, they're making, pretty big strides in getting many septic systems upgraded, and offering, rebates and that kind of thing. I can't speak to that currently. I'm 3 years removed from that project, but yeah, I mean, there should be an outreach program, if there's not one already in place, to have these folks, when their septic system fails at some point, when they replace it, they have to replace it with an IA system.
Right.
So granted, if they want to be proactive about it and replace it sooner, great. The reality of the situation is a little different, though, right? They're going to wait. They're not necessarily. Most people aren't going to be proactive and remove it. But some might, and that's going to be fantastic. The more incentives you can offer people, the better. That's out of the realm of this scope of work, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Obviously it all helps. People over fertilize, and people fertilize, and if you drive through, you see driveways with fertilizer on it. You're like, what are you doing? Because then it rains, and then it's just going to wash right in. But as Chris said, the runoff is a problem for sure, but also the groundwater is the dominant contributor to nitrate.
And properties around the lake.
And the properties around the lake, properties well north of the lake, are contributing to this.
For sure. Interesting.
So it's a regional thing. It's a regional problem that there's no one silver bullet that's going to fix it. Like Chris just mentioned, it's gonna.
In order of importance, what are the steps that should be taken in addition to the PRB?
that is
Good, Chris may want to answer that.
Yeah,
actually.
I was just about to say that's a Dr. Gobler
But we
question.
were just talking about, I mean, the sewering, critical. Upgrading the on-site septic systems, super important. Reducing flow, reducing fertilizer, also important. And just to your prior question, just for clarification, there's $20,000 available, $10,000 from Suffolk County, $10,000 from the state, and $20,000 from the town of Southampton for any homeowner to upgrade their septic system. So that's $40,000 total. In some cases, that covers the entire installation. In other cases, depending on the install, it can be more than that. But so those incentives are there. Dan already mentioned homes must be. I think if you're replacing your septic system, you have to put an alternative system in. If you're upgrading your home, you have to put an alternative septic system in. And there can be, at the village level where there's interest, there could even be legislation to mandate replacing systems, say, on transfer of sale. I think that was done in the village of East Hampton. So, and that's the biggest source. So,
The biggest problem, apart from the cost that can be covered, is probably the whole disruption of going through the process. It's
yes,
probably
yes,
like
certainly. It's. I mean, once and it's just being honest, it's a process. You have to. There's a lot of moving parts to get it all done, and you need an engineer and an installer, you need approvals, you need grant applications. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. All right, thank you very much. We spent a lot of time on this, but I appreciate it. It was very in depth, and we no pun intended. We've learned. We've learned.
80 feet worth.
Yeah, I know. We've learned a lot, so I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And Anthony has my contact information. If you feel free to contact me directly if you want to learn more about it.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
looking
happy
forward
to.
to you sending me the presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. And the data. Very excited. Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Sage, we're going to ask for BFJ to come on now. I think Noah should be there. I hope he's still there. Okay, thank you very much. This is going to be to discuss an update on the workforce housing proposal that BFJ, the Village Planners, has made specifically in the office districts of the village. So with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to Noah. Noah, you have the floor.
Great, thanks. Yes.
We can't hear you, Noah.
You can't hear me?
Not yet.
Okay. Bear with me. Apologies. Can you hear me now? Yes, no, can you hear me?
I still can't hear you, Noah.
Is it on? It's showing up as working.
Sage, is this something you've got? Maybe.
It looks like it's working.
Well, if this doesn't work, we might have to postpone this till the next meeting.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can.
Okay, great.
All right, excellent.
That
Thank
was
you.
unfortunate. Yes, of course. Okay, so thank you, Mayor, and thank you, trustees. I met with you, I think, in May to discuss some ideas for the two office districts in the village, the OD district and the HRO district.
And just for those that don't know, HRO is Hampton Road Office District.
Thank you. We presented a PowerPoint presentation. Bill, I know we talked about not needing a presentation. I did modify what we had done before with the kind of updated concepts.
Well, if we can go through it briskly, that would be fine.
Yes,
Noah,
I'll try to be fast.
thank you.
Can you give me a sense of how much time I have, just so I know how to kind of speed through?
I don't even know how to answer that question.
I'll try to go quickly.
All right.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we've updated the ideas based on subsequent conversations with Mayor and Alex Wallace, planning director. As we discussed in May, the intention of this was to address several ideas that were raised in the comprehensive plan that really get at housing affordability. So we're looking at locations for middle housing, so housing that reaches incomes that are middle incomes with different housing types. Some of the housing recommendations look at support for 2 to 4 unit homes in office districts, perhaps not having single family homes in those areas, and then requiring a percentage of those units to be set aside for workforce housing. So these are the 2 districts: office district, which runs along North Sea Road, and HRO, which is of course along Hampton Road. The existing zoning districts currently allow by special permit or special exemption single family, 2-family, and multiple dwelling units. However, there's no specific criteria for approval of residential uses, and it's my understanding that's been a source of conflict, and it's somewhat subjective. The idea is to have a little bit more guidance for the Zoning Board of Appeals and allowing for some residential uses, but ensuring that any new residential housing must include a workforce housing component. So the idea is that the special exemption for these 2 districts would allow 2-family, multiple dwelling, and mixed use, so housing over office, so the existing office uses which are allowed. And yes, there would be a requirement for workforce housing. So the bonus here would be a density bonus. So if I was a project and I had 25% of the units were affordable, I could achieve a maximum of 8 units per acre. And if I had an all workforce housing development, I could achieve 12 units per acre. And so we've kind of broken that down on what that might look like with the total number of units that would be built and the number of workforce housing units that could be built. It's important to recognize, especially in light of what was previously discussed, that the project must be approved by Suffolk County for septic, which is really the largest constraint on density. So the density is really limited by access to sewers or on-site wastewater treatment facility. There are ways to increase your density. A project could apply for a TDR from the county. So basically purchase rights, and where another property was sterilized, they could use that extra capacity. So that's an opportunity. If sewers were to happen in the future, that would really change things. Or an on-site system that could treat sewer. But essentially we're setting the maximum in the zoning, but there are other factors at work. Just want to give you a sense of what the 50% to 130%, which is kind of what we're talking about here for workforce housing. And this is for household median income for in 2022. The chart at the right just shows what those numbers look like. So yeah, we're looking at 50 to 130% of the Suffolk County median income. And then the rents for tenants should not exceed 30% of the gross household income. And that's important because you don't want to say, okay, let's just say someone is living in one of these homes and gets a bonus and is no longer within 130% of the Suffolk County median income. You certainly don't want to kick that person out. So we just want to make sure that they pay their share. So 30% of their income goes towards rent. There are other priorities that that could be included as priorities. So one would be whether the tenant works in the village or are they active volunteers, for example, for the fire department, police, or ocean rescue. And then
An ambulance.
Sorry, thank you. Ambulance.
One of the ambulance chiefs is sitting in the room, so I want to make sure. Yeah.
Or the second tier could be existing village residents. So, for example, people might want to downsize and stay within the community. This could be an option for them. Other things in the initial concept as the minimum housing size. Each dwelling unit shall be at least 450 square feet. So we have smaller units. Quality housing provisions to ensure that the workforce housing units and the market rate units are indistinguishable. And that's really just to promote equity and also to promote architectural and aesthetic standards from the exterior. So they're really gets at a lot of different things. We want to make sure that these buildings are integrated. For the sublet
Excuse me,
requirements-
could I ask a question? How does the previous chart with respect to income relate to the size of the units you're talking about?
It relates to family size. It doesn't relate to the size of the unit. That's typically how workforce housing units are determined is by the AMI. But you could have a two-bedroom unit with two people in a household or four people in a household. You really can't regulate. They're separate. I guess I don't know if I'm answering that question.
Yeah, I'm looking at the discrepancy in the maximum monthly rent, which is obviously based on the income, and I'm just wondering how, a family of four fits into an apartment that may have a very limited maximum monthly rent. That's all. I'm trying to wrap my head wrapped around.
Right. The numbers are based on household size. So if you want to, us to give you a more detailed chart that really breaks it down by household size, we can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, Noah. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So sublet requirements, I think the idea is to promote units for people that live and work in the community. So market rate units may not be sublet for less than 12 months, and workforce housing units must be the primary residence and shall not be sublet. We looked at the the dimensional requirements. We think there might be some, revisions to promote housing types that would be supportive of having more than one unit in a building. So there are just some slight changes. So within the existing HRO district, we're not proposing any changes. But within the HRO district, right now it says the maximum coverage of any 1 or 2 story building would be 3,000 square feet. But if there are more than one principal buildings, so for example, if you had you have multiple housing on the same site, this would allow for each of those buildings to not exceed 2,500 square feet of coverage. So again, just kind of looking at different housing types. And we have some graphics to show what we're looking at. I think one thing we were thinking was encouraging the ZBA to develop some design criteria, but the real hope and the intent of the design criteria would be to promote buildings that look indistinguishable from single-family homes, at least from the exterior. So we have some conceptual drawings of duplex housing on the left, the quadplex on the right. The next slide shows a multiplex or a multifamily development on the left, and then a multifamily cottage court housing type on the right. And that would take advantage of the provision of allowing for multiple principal buildings on the same site. Some other considerations, so we have parking standards. So right now the standards are a little bit high in our opinion. Right now the standards are 2 spaces per unit. Regardless of size. You might consider 1 space for a studio, 1.5 spaces for a 1 bedroom, 1.75 spaces for a 2 bedroom, and 2 spaces for a 3 bedroom. So it kind of graduates as the house size goes up. There would be regular reporting to the village by the property owner or the management representative, who would certify tenants to their income eligibility requirements and other provisions. So I tried to run through that fairly quickly.
You did a good job, Noah. Thank you.
Okay. Essentially, if you are in support of these concepts, we've submitted a memo. That memo is kind of treats the zoning in plain speak, but it would be needs to be written into zoning code. and that could be done by village attorney. We could assist with that, but essentially that's where we are at this point, and we're looking for input as we move forward.
Right, thank you, Noah. And I'd like to ask the board for input on this initial proposal to get their thoughts, if they like this concept or hate this concept or think it has some merit, or what members think. Do you want to start, Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about various proposals, various ways to create workforce housing. Definitely, if we can start using the office district that does not have any, I think that's a win-win. So I think it's a very good idea.
Okay, Len, do you want to?
No, I think it's very, very, very encouraging and interesting idea. And again, if you could add the piece that we talked about before, I'd like to see that. Thank you.
Robin, you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you. I agree with this quite much. And if you'd be so kind, the numbers, the sheet that you were showing as far as the 1 acre and how many units, can you forward that to us, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah.
Or the whole report, yeah.
I
You
think
could
it's a
forward
great,
Noah, yeah.
great concept. Thank you.
Trustee Stevenson, you used to be on the planning board. Maybe you have some thoughts.
Well, it's clear that this village needs workforce housing urgently, and what this plan would do it basically creates the ground that allows, with coding and with code and zoning, that will allow these buildings to be created in this area. I mean, the real test, though, is whether if we prepare it, will they come? Will the economics make sense to people who own those properties to make the conversion? And that's that obviously needs to happen, or else we go nowhere. But it's definitely not going to go anywhere unless we make these changes and make it possible for it to happen. So I think it's a big step forward.
Yeah, especially on North Sea Road, and the Planning Commission, we had actually looked into that, and many of the owners of the office properties were very interested to be able to convert to residence because the offices are just not being rented. They're not really making any money there. So if we can incentivize this in a way that we can actually create this workforce housing, it's a win-win for the owners and it's a win-win for the community as well.
Would the administration and enforcement of this be handled by a third party like the Housing Authority?
And no, I think you also mentioned that there are some not-for-profits that handle this as well. Maybe you could just speak briefly to that.
Yeah, we can look and see. There are nonprofits that do handle this. I think it would be a burden for the village to administer this. So you'd certainly want to work with a third party, and we can provide information on that as well. I don't have it at my fingertips, but yes, there are a lot of communities throughout Long Island, do work with a third party, and I'm sure the property owners might also prefer that as well, because all of the reporting is not necessarily within their purview or expertise.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a worthwhile concept to pursue further. I mean, especially for example, a teacher that works at one of the schools in the village. If they could be living on Hampton Road, they could literally walk to work, and they wouldn't even need a car, except occasionally. But I'm saying they could actually get to work by just walking down Hampton Road, which would make it much easier, and again, not contribute more vehicles to the streets of Southampton Village. So again, Noah, thank you very much. We're obviously going to have further meetings on this so that the public can weigh in as well. But I just wanted you to be able to present to the board tonight the concept, and certainly appreciate your time here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And now we're going to go on to the World War I. And I'm sorry, Halsey's. You're next. World War I monument update. And this is Joel Snodgrass of Steward Preservation Services, who has done an extensive review of the condition of the World War I memorial. And we are using him to do more work so that we can apply for a grant, which we hope then we will be able to have enough money to go forward with the restoration finally, after years of watching it unfortunately crumble to a degree. So Thank you very much. Go ahead, Joel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. And I'm trying to see if I can get this on here.
And I just want to say, we don't have another 45 minutes, so hopefully we can go through this.
I'll try to do this as
All
quickly
right, the
as I
Halseys
can.
want to go next, and I don't want to.
Yeah, I'll try to move this quickly.
Keep
I try
them
to
too
keep
long.
this simple, by the way. It's
Thank you.
one page, 2 sides, which I'll take you through. And really, I gave this to you first because I think it's easier for you to see photographs that basically relate to these different time periods. Part of my task that I was asked to deal with was trying to get a comprehensive view of what's occurred here, that's particularly in the last 30 years. And there's a lot of things that have gone on. It was quite confusing, to tell you the truth, because there's so much information coming from so many different areas, and a lot of it's not really collated. So part of my job has been to try to see through this in a linear way so that we can make sense of it going forward. My primary task was to do a building assessment, in this case a structure or monument, to look at it, because that's what I do as an architectural conservator. I'm looking at old houses most of the time for their pathology so that we can determine what's happened, why has it happened, what do we need to do to correct it. And there's a lot of that going on here, but I should start by saying a lot of good work has been done. And it does have good bones. It refuses to let go, which is what we all want to know. So starting, you'll see on this page, and I'm putting a copy of it here as well in case it needs to be referred to, which I think we can do after the photos. But in 1992, 1993, as you know, was 30 years ago, was the first restoration. And I've categorized this as studies that were done, documents that came from that, essentially, work that was executed, and then whether or not there was grant funding, just to give you the basic overview of this. So there was reviews, there were documents put together by Shaliff and Rogers, the local architectural firm, including drawings, which is what drove the restoration at that time, and that was funded by a grant. And so I'm just going to take you through these quickly. Then the thing I want you to notice is that the monument at that time, you can see how modeled it is in this photograph. A lot of water was going through it because of the roof system that was there. So it was getting to that point where it was looking tattered and it was suffering from damage in a lot of areas. The next picture is, you can see it was a flat roof. Essentially, it was designed as a sort of an evaporation pond, if you will, 4 drains in each of the corners. But this was what we call a hot mop roof, which was basically tar paper with hot tar poured on it. They have very limited life. It's not surprising when they fail, which this did, prompting a new roof to be put on. But I wanted to make sure you could see this, and you can see the level of, in the corner here, of how shallow the edge walls were at that time. So the physical structure of the roof was changed at this time. You can also see the amount of water coming through, and this is, I believe, is looking at through the east side passageway. And particularly, I also want you to notice this area of overlap, this shallow overlap of the lintel. Now, this is a sizable piece of limestone covering the entryway. And notice that on top of it is another joint going up, and then there's another one that goes up. So basically, you have 3 pieces of sizable stone with a 2-inch overlap spanning, which is shallow for that kind of installation. As a result, it has cracked over time. And of course, those things are of a structural nature and of structural concern. So, and then the last was, of course, as we all know, the floor. This is a cement patch on the west side of the central temple, I'm going to call it. And you can see the edge of where the altar is, and there are also patches here. So at the time of 1993, the floor had really, really suffered. This is an entirely a limestone structure. Limestone is really not meant to be sitting in water or really in horizontal installation because it just soaks it up like a sponge. And we live in an environment that freezes, and that's the disaster for limestone. So it literally cleaves apart, which is what, if any of you have walked by it of late, you see there's a shattering that's going on of the limestone. So that's a pretty typical reaction. Well, luckily, a grant was pursued, and the state funded you to do these things, including changing the floor system, which, of course, as happens sometimes with the state, they decided later on that they don't like that floor system anymore and that they don't want to deal with you unless you change it. So some substantial work was carried out at that time. As you can see, it was covered over. This is looking from the southwest, from the lakeside. And staging was put up because a lot of work was done. The new roof was put on at that time, including with these are scuppers. Unfortunately, these were PVC scuppers, which are lightweight enough that in a really high wind, they get kicked right off the roof. I've climbed literally climbed all over the structure, including the roof, and they're not up there anymore. After 30 years, a lot of roof systems really don't hold up well. That's about an average lifetime for a lot of roof systems. This one included, which means we're right at that threshold that could be expected, and sure enough, it's having some problems. Water is coming through, clogs are happening, and so on. And here's your floor system in all its glory at that time, which was shattering to pieces. So the thought premise was, let's save what we can save. They would cut around the columns in spaces so that they wouldn't have to pull them completely apart, but they had to undermine on many of these, and they replaced the floor system with the granite. It's hard for me to say whether or not this is exactly what was there. My sense is that it's slightly changed in its design because you see areas that were scalloped and now they're no longer scalloped and so on. However, obviously granite is an extremely durable surface, so as a floor system, it worked great. It just wasn't very compatible with all the surrounding limestone, and the limestone suffered as a result of this. Not just because of the material, because granite is basically impervious and extremely tenacious, but because the mortaring system around it was very tight and hard, meaning that when the limestone needs to move, it has nowhere to go. As a result, it shatters in the process. So it's simply because of a change in the material, again, in a horizontal situation. I also want you to notice this, that the installation is basically in hard packed sand. This is a typical installation for a lot of masonry walkways because it allows percolation of water that goes into it. At least that's the idea, to move downward and out. I'd say there was some success to that, but not completely. Now, the thing to note here is in the next category, 2007, there was a follow-up process. This is 14 years later, going back to the state saying, we're having some problems. Can we do this? And that's when the state said, we don't like the floor. So as long as you've got that floor, don't come talking to us. But there was a work scope produced. There were decisions made to move forward. And what I want you to notice is not only that we have our nice young fellow here merrily playing on this, which of course I'm the first one to wave the, you need to take care of this because you have citizens who might get hurt, is notice where the damage is happening. It's happening at the interface of the granite and the limestone. Not out here, but right in this border. Notice it also here. It's happening at that section. That's because the granite's unforgiving, the limestone has nowhere to go, and this is locked down, so that interface is where you see the damage. Also note that there was some damage going on here where there's some replacements being done at the time, but this was 2007. Now we're into 2011, which is the next category. So there was an engineering review, there were additional architectural drawings by Shaliff and Rogers again, and there was another restoration that was carried out. So this is 4 years later, yes, than 2007, excuse me, let me move this. And notice where the damage is now. Oops, sorry. I'm having a little trouble here at this. Oh goodness. My apologies, but I seem to be having some problem with the Zoom. So I think since I'm struggling with the photos, until I can get those up, why don't I at least take you through the page that I've produced to you. So what happened was the floor system basically has, if you've been out there any time recently, you'll see that all of the limestone at that upper level of where the granite floors are cracked, severely cracked. And that's, again, as a result of this relationship between the granite and the limestone floor, which is really not meant to take this. So there's a number of things going on. The roof has deteriorated, the floor systems have deteriorated, water is entering from the roof into the limestone, it's causing damage to it, it's causing, there's a sizable cracked beam that exists, which has been repaired, and yet when these things are repaired, it's dependent on a dry environment lasting. And actually there is in following up to the repair system, which happened in 2016, a local engineering firm actually did a review of the repair and said the repair was actually good, standard, solid, was acceptable as long as the conditions remained absolutely dry. Well, what we know has not happened is that has not happened. So, and we've had some of these discussions before, of course, but what came out of this was there are a number of issues that are going on. Some require structural review because you have conditions that are potentially hazardous or potential liability. So you definitely want to have that reviewed. The other is, how do we make a better mousetrap? What's been going on is good efforts have been made trying to address this problem, and it's really not been going anywhere successfully for any length of time. You can see there are 7 phases to this in a 30-year period. So the idea is, instead of just going forward with the same that we've been doing in the past, let's examine this very, very carefully in terms of the basics of it's suffering because of water and water absorption. How do we deal with this more effectively? So part of my recommendations as a conservator, I'm looking at things to try to determine what's going wrong, what do we need to do about it, but do we need to make changes? So part of my recommendations have been to consider what are the additional examinations that need to happen. I'm neither a civil engineer or a structural engineer. I do work in the capacity of looking at these things, but I also know when to say these are the professionals who now need to come into play. So we've been having preliminary discussions with engineers regarding this and architects regarding scoping this out so this can be put out to bid in for the purpose of getting a grant, because that's required by New York State, is to have licensed plans and specifications produced. But so the way this would go forward, and this is what I've been producing, is conditions assessments in terms of what's there, recommendations for how to treat it, and putting this together so it can be used for the facilitation of a grant application, which of course is being managed by Jen Messiana Hayam. And we've been working together on this very, very closely. I was about to say I'm part of the wet and muddy crowd, and that I was also out on the site this afternoon. I met with the engineers this afternoon. So if I can just quickly show you the other parts of this page, you'll see, and I don't have to take you through the conditions because I've already described that, but in terms of the restoration repair recommendations, I'll go through very quickly. So the roof needs to be replaced. A better roof membrane system can be used. This is not to criticize the one that was there, it's just we learned it was somewhat of a new system at that time. We put something that's much more durable. The roof structure, which has been changed, it used to be totally flat, now it's a slight gable, if you will, with a pitch. That would also probably be modified to be a bit more effective. The danger is this is not like any industrial roof you've seen, which have overflow mechanisms in place for ice damming. That doesn't exist here. So part of the challenge is to try to figure out a roof system that will be very effective, but also that doesn't change the physical appearance of the structure. You'll note that there are 4 little lion's heads sticking. Those are the leader downspouts, if you will. When the water's up there, it spits out the mouth of the lion and free flows down to the ground, soaking the grade, which is causing partially the limestone at grade getting very wet, and some of it has spalled and blown off as well as a result of it. So we have water everywhere. We also have the problem of how do we effectively get it off so that it's not going into the structure, but also moving away from the structure. Then we have repairs to damaged limestone as a normal process. The east side end wall, the closest to the playground, has been tilting, literally pivoting from its bottom level for about 12 years. It was noticed earlier on, and it's not going at a rapid rate, but it is still moving. You can see the repair fills that were put in are now starting to separate further. So it needs to be looked at. It probably needs to be taken down and reconstructed so it's not moving. So there's a number of things that need to go on. Then we have all of the floor system that will probably need to be replaced. However, the good news from the state is that you don't necessarily have to go back to limestone. You can use things like cast stone to imitate the limestone, but it's much more durable. So there's some flexibility in terms of a better product, if you will.
And the state would let us do that with the grant
state
money?
would yes, I think that because they're at the point where they fully recognize that this is a problem. And they understand that there was good efforts trying to solve it using granite, but that didn't work out. So now they're at the point of saying what they essentially need is a justified reason for the request. So it's already been put before them that this may be where this needs to go.
Excuse me, what department is that? Is that Housing and Community Renewal?
It's this State Office of Historic Preservation, SHPO.
Thank you.
And then the last one, and I'm broadly categorizing these things, is the correction of the drainage, both from the flooring and the steps and the perimeter foundation, which includes those lion head areas of falling down. So it's a number of things that need to be done, and the thought is, I don't think the village wants to Band-Aid this because of what you've seen happen over 30 years. So it really becomes quite a bit of work and potentially quite expensive. And so the idea is to scope this out and go for a grant, obviously. you'll see I have next steps here. So preparatory work, which includes structural review addressing the things I've just mentioned, civil engineering to look at things like drainage and where it would go on the site, and if it needs to be buried, which it very likely would be, how that would be best facilitated. And then architectural, I'm phrasing as architectural engineering can do it as well, is to put together the documents that would go out to bid, which are required for a state grant. You'll notice down at the bottom, grant-funded project execution includes a preliminary archaeological stage, because the state will automatically say if you're doing any ground disturbance whatsoever, and even though that entire site has likely been disturbed, because when they built the monument, you know that it was torn apart. When they built the fountain, you could say the same thing. And when they built the park, they probably regraded the entire area. So it's hard to say if anything has not been disturbed. However, it's good practice to make sure that that doesn't happen. And a preliminary phase 1 archaeological review basically is a test pit review, whereas they'll do standard test pits every 25 feet to see what they may come up with, and that would be in the area where there's piping and there might be some sort of underground drainage being facilitated. The part of the reason for suggesting that these preliminary preparatory work as sort of out of pocket, if you will, not part of the grant, is because there's an advantage to you in several ways. One is that you can get that work started faster than having to wait for approvals from the grant process, which is normally the following spring, which means the grant deadline for this application is next week. Normally, you're not getting an authorized letter for approval to move forward until the spring, because they need till the fall to make their decisions, and then they have to make a formal announcement, and then you need to get an actual formal letter that says you can proceed, because then you'd only be able to start these studies. The second thing is that these can often be used as a match that you need for the grant, because it's part of the work as well. And it also precludes you from having to take lowest qualified bid on what I consider to be probably the most important part of the work, is designing it properly. And that's not to say anything disparaging about firms that are out there. It's just you want to make sure you have the right firm that you feel comfortable that you're choosing, and this sort of frees up the process for you to be able to do that. So where I am at now is the product that I'm going to be giving the village is a report which covers all this and has photographs and has things broken down in a way where you can see it. So yes, I will be providing that to you. We're sort of on a fast track, synthesizing that in a different way for the purpose of this grant application. So that's the priority right now, is trying to get this information literally in the next week, ready to go.
And your report will be completed?
And a summarized version of it, and then I'll be giving you something that's a little more expanded a bit.
Okay, but I was just wondering what's necessary for the grant application.
A summarized version of all of these things, yeah. So Jen and I are trying to put that all together right now.
All right, and we do have, so the board knows, we do have a draft of a resolution as a walk-on if the board wants to proceed with applying for the grant.
Terrific.
This evening.
Terrific.
So that we make the deadline.
Okay, that's fantastic. And yes, I'll give you photographs that I wish I'd had the ability to get up here. I got frozen.
No, this is quite thorough. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. It was a very thorough report. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And now we will go to Ben Halsey and his Eagle Scout project. Please come to the podium, Ben, and introduce yourself and explain your project. And thank you for sitting through all this, but I hope that you found it educational.
Oh, yeah. Variety of topics. Okay. Good evening. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mayor Menger, Deputy Mayor Zananzi, Superintendent Phillips, and the Southampton Village Board of Trustees for allowing me the opportunity to stand before you tonight. My name is Ben Halsey, and I am currently a Life Scout as a member of Boy Scout Troop 58 of Southampton. I have held several positions of leadership within my troop since joining in March of 2018, including scribe, troop guide, and my current role, which is senior patrol leader, where I effectively serve as the youth head of the troop. Additionally, I was elected to the Order of the Arrow earlier this year, which is in essence the honor society of Boy Scouts, wherein members are elected by their fellow Scouts for best exemplifying the Scout oath and law in their daily lives. As a committed member of Scouting for the past 6 years, I have now come to the point in my journey where I am attempting to reach the coveted rank of Eagle, a prestigious honor earned by only 6% of Scouts. Some of the requirements to reach one's Eagle distinction are to earn 21 merit badges demonstrating proficiency in a variety of practical skills, serve in several leadership positions, and to attend monthly weekend and annual summer week-long camping outings. As some of you may be familiar with, Requirement 5 is considered the cornerstone of one's path to Eagle. It often constitutes the most difficult one to achieve. It reads as follows. While a Life Scout, plan, develop, and give leadership to others in a service project helpful to any religious institution, any school, or your community. After completion, the candidate must sit for a board of review, during which a comprehensive review is conducted into the planning, execution, and outcome of the project, as well as a thorough evaluation of the candidate's service and scouting as a whole and life ambitions. For my project, I decided to construct a little free library. I networked with several local officials, including Elizabeth Burns with Rogers Memorial Library. She remarked that several structures have already been erected around the village, and although some have not been able to withstand extreme weather conditions, the ones that have remained have been largely successful. I was also in contact with former Southampton Deputy Mayor Gina Aresta, who have gotten to know well through my involvement as elector at Sacred Hearts Parish. When I inquired about potential locations of need for the construction of a new structure, Mrs. Burns told me that one at the LIRR station was desired and that several members of the community had suggested one be built there. She was happy to hear that someone had been giving this due consideration. My original intention was to place the library directly next to the ticket office, just a few feet from the train platform. I reached out to the railroad, and unfortunately they did not give me approval to build a structure on MTA property after several months of communication, citing insurance and compensation reasons. However, Mrs. Aresta suggested that the area of grass in the parking lot near the flagpole could serve as a suitable alternative location for the library, since it is close enough to the station. To be more exact, the structure would be located directly across the street from the platform, and would be about 2 square feet in area and raised on a wooden post, similar to the ones already in public spaces such as Agawam Park. I am asking your approval to construct a small wooden structure somewhere around these specifications. I have corresponded with Elizabeth Burns, who is the director of the Rogers Memorial Library in Southampton, and Susan Johns, who is the head of the Friends of the Library, an all-volunteer organization that raises money for library programs and services that don't receive public funding. If I were to receive permission for the construction of the library, the Friends of the Library would supply the books on a regular basis, as they do for a similar structure located in another part of the village. As with existing little free libraries, people would be free to take or leave books as they please. This would be the essential function of the library. My hope is that once the library provides a starting supply of books, people would be inclined to keep it going by taking and leaving books, though I would monitor it periodically to ensure a steady supply. The books would range in topics, and I know that the library also has large print books that may be offered for visually impaired individuals. I was also told that since the Rogers Memorial Library has experience with promoting such structures, the building manager of the library, Anthony Valley, would also be available to share his insights regarding the project. I am also currently a rising senior at Chaminade High School in Mineola. As such, I rely on the railroad every day to go to and from school, including both my academics and my extracurricular activities. I have seen firsthand the amount of foot traffic that passes through the station, especially during the summer months. I'm hoping to attend Boston College next year, and I hope to seek out a career in either journalism, law, or politics. I humbly ask your approval in my carrying out this ambitious project. Your support will be critical to not only helping me attain the rank of Eagle, but fulfilling an important community need. Thank you. And I have some pictures. So this is like a typical one. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's kind of small.
Yep.
And yeah, sorry.
And if you actually place it on the table, Sage, you're able to capture it if you place it on the table? So if you place the objects on the table facing us, there's a camera that will above that will capture it. No. Just put it on the table here, and that camera will catch it. A little bit further down. Right. No.
Okay.
Sage, can you catch it yet? No, do it close to us. Yeah. There you go. Perfect. That should be good. How's that? Did you get that, Sage? Okay. Excellent.
Yep. So you can see in the photos, in the first and second photo, that's the intended location for it. It would involve a bit of digging, and I know there are flowers there, but that's, that location where the flagpole is, that's where it would likely go. And then on the right, I have a picture of what a typical one might look like. There are several ones. They vary slightly in size, but that's the general idea.
Would you be able to show us a schematic, drawing or design of the one before you construct it, so we can just take a look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can
All right.
I can get you a drawing with the exact dimensions and
Yeah,
whatnot.
I think that'd be helpful.
Then
Thank you.
you're going to create this yourself? You're going to construct it? You have that skill set?
Well, I have to gather service hours from my fellow scouts, so it's really a team effort. But I'm the one guiding and leading the
Great.
construction.
Excellent.
I think it's a great idea. You have a built-in audience, train riders who would like to read something. It's wonderful. Great idea.
So again, Ben, I'd love to just see what you're going to build, but then give you permission to go ahead and work with Steve Phillips and the Department of Public Works in the placement of it down at the on the village right away.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you so much.
And I see very proud parents sitting in the audience.
Thank you.
Nicely
you.
done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Julie, you're up next. Treasurer's report. Thank you. Thank you, Ben, very much. Thank you for your time here.
Good evening, Mayor and the Board of Trustees. Tonight, I would like to go over May 31st, 2024 fiscal year-end financial results. These are unaudited, so just so everyone's aware. Our revenue, our adopted budget was $33,748,522. We received $38,793,965. The key revenue drivers here are building permits. We budgeted $1.5 million and we collected $4 million. Which I have to say, if we have the treasurer's office does keep a annual listing throughout the years historically, and we this is abnormal this year. I have to say this is the highest we've collected since 2010. But we have a 13-year average from 2010 to 2023, and that was 1.9 million. So we're right around 1.5. Budgeting is moderately conservative, I feel. New York State controllers and Moody's also suggest that we keep conservative budgeting revenue. I know Moody's in our presentation, when we achieved a AAA bond rating, they were very happy that we are conservative in our revenue budgeting. For interest, we budgeted $250,000. We collected 1.5, which was great. Thank you for the federal government.
Yeah. That's the Federal Reserve.
Oh yeah, Federal Reserve. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, you're right.
And our interest rate as of May was 5.2%. Mortgage tax, we budgeted $975,000. We collected $1.1 million. Last year's mortgage tax that we collected was $1.9 million, so it did go down $800,000.
Well, that was a significant shift, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was. And the average for the 13-year average for mortgage tax, because I also keep that as well, is 1.2 million. So if we had gone with the average, we still would have undercut ourselves. So it's good that we kept it at the 975,000.
Right.
As for expenditures, our adopted budget, same as our revenue, is $33,748,522. And expended and encumbered is $34,161,735. So we did over expend by 1.2%. Also, just so you all know, this does exclude the $7 million that the board transferred. We transferred twice to capital, one in July of 2023, $4 million, and the other in March of 2024, which was $3 million. The key revenue drivers here that why we expended was we did settle a radio operator contract. It was 5 years. So that was $363,000. And our village insurance did increase more than anticipated. I'm sure you all know that probably property insurance has gone up as well. But we also, Village Administrator Anthony Carter went over when he first came in the insurance for the vehicles and found vehicles that weren't listed on our insurance, and since we put them on our insurance, so that did cause it to go up.
That's a problem. So we had some uninsured vehicles.
Yes,
Okay.
but now they're insured.
Good.
Additionally, we had many building repairs throughout the village. We had fire sprinkler systems. I know in the police department they upgraded them, and as well as in the ambulance building. We had HVAC that was done in here in this room,
Yeah.
in the village server, the PD gym you had, and village hall heat went out, so we had to have them come and do building repairs, as well as plumbing. We had some plumbing there, but we needed help to come into compliance to pass inspections. I know Suffolk County Water Authority required us to do a repair on something. I can't remember off the top of my head what it was. But we did plumbing in old ambulance building, and 25 Job's Lane needed more repairs. Additionally, I just want to point out tonight there is a budget amendment on that is basically cleanup of budgetary items from pushing back accrual payables that were invoices from May and prior that have just now came into our possession because some vendors are late in getting us invoices. But overall, the village is projecting an operating surplus of $4.6 million, which is wonderful. Our current financial fiscal year update, our tax collection, our levy was $27,081,000, and we've collected $24,758,000. So that's 91% of the tax collections we've taken in. That is the same as last year this time as well. And just key
I guess
point.
some people like paying penalties for being late.
Yeah. Key point, we're just closing out year end and we're preparing for our audit. Our auditors are scheduled to come the beginning of September as well. So I'll take any questions
Excellent,
if you have
Julie.
anything.
All right. Ed, Len, Roy, Robin.
Nicely done. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Julie.
Yes.
That was excellent. Thank you. All right. With that, we will now move on to correspondence to the board. Mr. Carter.
We have two correspondence to the board. First one is a correspondence from David Rung concerning village payroll. And the second correspondence is from Jay Fitzpatrick, and it's regarding noise complaints from commercial establishments.
Okay. Thank you very much. Suggested resolutions we will move to, and I think, Len, you will take the first one.
Okay, number one, resolve the claims for the warrant dated July 23rd, 2024, totaling $221,754.99. Warrant number A6 General. $426,960.27. Warrant number H2 Capital. $40,541.80. Warrant number A7 Payables. And $1,956.09. Warrant number T3 Trust are audited and approved. So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Resolved, the reading of the minutes for the March 2024 BOT meetings are dispensed, accepted as filed by the village clerk, and the actions taken at those meetings are hereby ratified and approved.
Okay, is
So
that
moved.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, thank you.
Whereas the Board of Trustees of the Village of Southampton is considering a local law, Chapter 116-24, the Village Code, Board of Appeals, Organization and General Procedure, to amend the process for issuing ZBA decisions, and whereas the Village of Southampton's Planning Director has conducted a review of the proposed action, and whereas the matter was referred to the Suffolk County Planning Commission for review pursuant to General Municipal Law, Section 239-M, and whereas on July 16th, 2024, the Suffolk County Planning Commission staff issued a letter of local determination, and whereas a public hearing was held by the Village Board of Trustees on July 11th, 2024, at which time all persons either for or against the amendment were heard, and whereas the public hearing was closed but the record was kept open for 10 days to receive additional written comments, and whereas the Board of Trustees of the Village of Southampton has determined that this proposed local law is considered a Type 2 action under 6 New York Code of Rules and Regulations, Part 617.5, provisions of the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, and that no further review under SECRA Article 8 is necessary. Now therefore be it resolved that local law number 27 of 2024 is hereby adopted. That's your motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, I just wanted to say that we did not receive any written correspondence further to this local law. We kept it open again for the 10 days. Nothing came in. This is, again, just as a reminder to expedite the process of decisions being rendered by the Zoning Board of Appeals. If something's very straightforward, not complicated, the attorney will write a short form of a decision. If anyone requests a long form, or there's any, help me out here, Counselor, any one who feels aggrieved, they can request a long form decision.
Anybody who would have a right to challenge it would have a right to ask for the
Anyone
long
who has
form
standing
decision. Anyone who had
would
standing.
be able to have request a long form decision. So
Right.
this is only really going to be used, obviously, in the minor zoning appeals. I mean zoning variances. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, now number 4, whereas the Board of Trustees of the Village of Southampton has determined that this proposed local law is considered a type 2 action under 6 New York Code of Rules and Regulations, Part 617.5, provisions of the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, and that no further review under the New York Environmental Conservation Law, Article 8 is necessary. Be it hereby resolved that the village board hereby directs that a public hearing shall be held as a hybrid in-person Zoom meeting on August 8th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at the Village Meeting Room at the Southampton Village Hall located at 23 Main Street, Southampton, New York, 11968, to hear any and all persons either for or against a proposed local law entitled A Local Law Amending Chapter 97, Subdivision of Land of the Village Code of Southampton to provide for cluster subdivisions as recommended by the 2022 revision to the village's comprehensive plan. That is your motion. This is just a local law designed to give the planning board some flexibility to require cluster subdivisions where they deem it appropriate.
And so at this point, we are just noticing the public hearing
Correct.
for the next meeting. So I will make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Whereas the Village of Southampton Board of Trustees issued a request for proposal for consulting and engineering services for the village boards and departments, and whereas the Village Board of Trustees appointed a committee consisting of the village administrator, Anthony Carter, senior building inspector, Christopher Talbot, superintendent of public works, Stephen Phillips Jr., planning commission member, Michael Anderson, and zoning board of appeals member, Luke Ferrin, to review the proposals and make a recommendation to the village mayor and board. Now therefore be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the RFP committee, the mayor hereby appoints the following firm as the Village of Southampton's professional consultant in the area specified. Planning for Village Board, BFJ Planning, Buckhurst Fish and Jack Mar Incorporated. I will make the motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Whereas during the 2024 budget process, the Village Board of Trustees approved the purchase of a new ambulance truck at an estimated cost of $395,000 to be allocated over 3 years. And whereas after discussions with the vendor, the actual projected cost of the new ambulance is $485,651. And whereas, based upon the actual projected cost, and since the cost of the ambulance is allocated over a 3-year period, there will be an increase in allocation of $30,217 each year. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Village Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the mayor to sign a purchase agreement with Hendrickson Fire Rescue Equipment, subject to approval as to form by village attorney, for the purchase of a 2025 PL Custom Classic T1 F450 4x4 ambulance at a total cost of $485,651. And be it further resolved, the Village Board of Trustees hereby amends the 2024 through 2027 capital budget, increasing the cost of the new ambulance truck by $90,651 to be allocated over 3 years, subject to permissive referendum. So moved.
Second, any discussion here?
I'd simply like to say that this is the second new ambulance for our wonderful volunteer ambulance department. The first one was purchased 3 years ago. They are replacing ambulances that date to 2005, so they're almost, the one that's being replaced is
20
nearly
years old.
20 years old. I'm sure Chief Gill, as he sat here tonight, was thinking it might be 2026 before he gets a new one. But I thank you for your patience here tonight. And another couple of hours doesn't really make that much difference, does it? No. We need the best equipment for our guys and women in the volunteer services to operate. And this is a lot of money for an ambulance, but it does include some of the latest, greatest stuff. I wonder, Chief, if you would just like to speak a bit about it.
So we designed this ambulance in 2021, knowing that this will provide the highest level of care medically for the village taxpayers and its visitors. We meticulously researched for hours and days on end with a committee of multiple people to make sure that we are not spending money that isn't necessary in equipment we wouldn't use, and we're not getting equipment that we exceptionally need to provide that care. So we did hours of research, and we made sure that this ambulance is everything this village will need, so it lasts a long time. We'll be able to use this box that's on this ambulance and remount it on further chassis down the line to save the taxpayers money in the future.
And this really is almost a carbon copy of the one that you just took possession of, correct?
Absolutely. So what that'll allow us to do is basically, we've gone through this ambulance over the last 6 months after receiving it, made sure that there's nothing that we need to change to benefits the taxpayers or the visitors, and we found nothing that we believe that will increase the medical capacity that we'll be able to provide for the village. So at this time, it's a complete carbon copy, and we will not need to put in any change orders that we have received yet.
Good. Excellent. All right, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, congratulations, you're going to get a new ambulance.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, Mayor and the board. Thank you.
Okay, whereas the village board approves resolution 2024-364, authorizing the mayor of the village board of trustees to execute an agreement with VHB Engineering, Landscape Architecture and Geology, PC VHB, amending the 2021 traffic calming study agreement to provide additional traffic engineering services to assess the traffic conditions at various locations within the village of Southampton. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby amends Resolution 2024-346 to increase the project by $29,500 at a total project cost not to exceed $52,990 to be paid from trustee special projects A1010443, subject to approval as to form by village attorney. I will make the motion.
Second.
Discussion. Actually, this was approved. This actually is merely moving the money from one account to the other to make this whole. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Julie? Designating, exactly.
Is there a specific area they'll be looking at?
No, this is
all
not
done.
for anything new. This is literally going back to 2021 items that have yet to be paid.
So this was the study that was done on Hill Street and the left turns and the right turns.
There
and
were
all that.
actually many different
Okay.
items that actually are captured here. Some that were requested by the previous administration, and we finally got the bill, and so we have to pay for the work that was completed.
Got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Number 8, resolve the Village Board of Trustees approves the following attached budget amendment number 368 for the fiscal year ending May 31st, 2024 for various budget line shortfalls, total transfer of $351,781.73. So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Again, just to clarify, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
What this is. We encumbered the money because we knew we would have to pay it from last year's budget, but we didn't get the invoices from the vendors until this month, or last month and this month. So that's why we are.
But it's for work that was done in the last fiscal year.
Yes, right.
Yeah, got it. All right, thank you, Mr. Zananti.
Number 9, resolved that the mayor or his designee is hereby authorized and directed to file an application for funds from the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation in accordance with the provisions of Title IX of the Environmental Protection Act of 1993 in the amount not to exceed $675,000, with local matching share to total 50% of eligible project costs, and upon approval of said request to enter into and execute a project agreement with the state for such financial assistance to this Village of Southampton for the World War I Monument Restoration Project, and if appropriate, a conservation, assessment, preservation covenant to the deed of the assisted property.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
So discussion, this is just so that we can apply for this grant before the month is out and the grant is no longer available to us. So that's what we were talking about with Mr. Snodgrass. So all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees approves the proposal submitted by Nancy Kane to coordinate the 12th Annual Southampton Fest to be held on Friday, October 4th, 2024, through Sunday, October 6th, 2024. This proposal is $15,000 funded by Trustees Special Projects. So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now I'm going to make a motion to have walk-on resolutions. I think we spoke about one of them. There are 5 actually resolutions. I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I will do the first one. Whereas Lake Agawam is a 64-acre freshwater lake in the village of Southampton that is separated from the ocean by a barrier beach. An outfall and gate valve at the southern part of the lake drains to the ocean as a means to control lake level. And whereas Lake Agawam has routinely experienced blooms of, cyanobacteria since at least 2013, and whereas studies have shown that nitrogen loading to the lake from groundwater discharge, benthic flux, and stormwater have contributed to these cyanobacteria blooms. Due to the presence of harmful algal blooms, HABs, swimming and fishing is not permitted at various times throughout the year, and the beach is closed when the lake is draining. Although it is a freshwater lake, research conducted at Stony Brook University has indicated that excessive nitrogen loading is the trigger for these HABs. Therefore, reducing the nitrogen load to the lake has been a topic of much interest over the past several years. Whereas the village has sought and been awarded grant money to address the nitrogen load in groundwater discharging into the lake, and whereas a permeable reactive barrier, PRB, is one means to passively reduce the nitrogen load in groundwater prior to discharging at base flow to the lake, and whereas the village has determined that utilizing a formal request for proposals is the best method of locating the necessary professionals to perform this project for the village. Now therefore be it resolved that the village shall issue the annexed request for proposals on July 29th, 2024, and shall publish a notice of their request for proposals.
That's your motion.
That's my motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we will start moving on getting RFPs to see about putting in the PRB as discussed earlier this evening.
Okay, number 2 is be it hereby resolved that the village board hereby directs that a public hearing shall be held as a hybrid in-person Zoom meeting on August 8th, 2024 at 8 p.m. at the village meeting room at the Southampton Village Hall located at 23 Main Street, Southampton, 11968 to hear any and all persons either for or against a proposed special permit for a workforce housing development and resort hotel use at 71 Hill Street in the village of Southampton pursuant to Chapter 116-5F of the Village Code of Southampton. The property is further identified on the Suffolk County Tax Map as 0904, Section 6, Block 1, Lot 8, and located at the northeast corner of Hill Street and Viridian Way. And be it further resolved that the village clerk is hereby authorized and directed to publish and post this notice of public hearing. So that's your
I'll make the
motion.
motion.
I'll second.
I'll make it just a discussion
Sure.
and correction. You said August 8th, 2024 at 8 p.m. It is at 6 p.m.
Then I misspoke because it actually says 6 p.m. So
Yeah.
it's possible I misspoke.
It's,
and I
it's
apologize.
yeah, it's at the
Okay.
regular
Correct.
meeting for the month of August.
Right.
Correct. Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Number 3, resolution authorizing notice to bidders for the restoration of the Southampton Historical Museum. Whereas in December 2023, the village entered an agreement with Sheffield and Rogers Architects PCAIA to prepare a plan and design for the restoration of the Southampton Historical Museum. And whereas the plans are complete and the village is in search of an appropriate contractor for the restoration project, now there be it resolved, the Board of Trustees authorizes the village clerk to publish the attached notice to bidders in the next edition of the Southampton Press. Notice to the parties interested in submitting a proposal from the Rogers Mansion exterior restoration, take notice that sealed proposals will be received by the village clerk, Southampton Village Hall on August 13th at 2 p.m. prevailing time when they will be publicly open and read aloud for Rogers Mansion's exterior restoration. Bid documents will be available beginning on July 25th, 2024 at 9 a.m. by contacting, and the email is there. You can see it as on the website, I'm sure, and our village administrator can provide that for you. Documents will be emailed during the regular business hours, Monday through Friday, except holidays. Bidders interested in the project are required to visit the New York State Department of Labor Prevailing Wages Find Project, then enter the prevailing rate case number 202-400-7847 to view the original prevailing wage schedule or access directly at, and the email link is there. I'm sure we can get that on the website for you, and our village administrator can quote that.
Just one more line on the back. And
One more line on the back.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Apologize. Yeah.
Okay. A pre-bid walkthrough for the project will be held on Thursday, July 30th, 2024 at 9 a.m.
That's your motion.
That's my motion.
I'll second. Discussion. I believe we have grant money for this work. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes,
Okay. So
we do.
So that we are just now looking for a contractor to be able to carry out the work.
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees accepts the resignation of Southampton Village Fire Department Hose Company Number 1 member Kenneth Rothwell with 20.45 years of service, effective June 4th, 2024. So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Resolved, the Board of Trustees accepts the resignation of Southampton Village Fire Department Hook and Ladder Company Number 1 member Nicholas Pobat with 20.45 years of service, effective July 2nd, 2024. So moved.
Second. All in
Just a
favor?
brief discussion. I
Nope.
just want to thank both of these gentlemen for their exemplary service over 20 years to the village of Southampton. Thank you.
I think it's interesting that they both had exactly the same amount of time with the fire department, even though they're in different companies. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, excellent. That concludes the walk-on resolutions. At this time, we will now move to comments from board members, and I will start with Trustee Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm quite excited that the last board meeting, thanks to the support of our board, that we were approved for the cabanas for, as we say, the number 2 beach, or we like to think of it as the number 1 beach. And I want to commend my team, Kathy Sweeney, Matt Weeds, and I'm sure the mayor will be very happy that we came in with the price 50% less than what was agreed upon. So I commend them and thank them. I asked them to go back and just take a closer look, and they did. So we have a superior product at half the price and coming in a faster time frame. So we're looking for recovering that money this summer is projected, and then also leaning into profit. So I commend an excellent staff with working with me for that. Thank you both, Kathy and Matt. Thank you so very much. And I'm quite excited for the summer. Drone Patrol, let me just commend our police officers for the drone patrol, keeping an eye watch over, making sure our shores are safe. Once again, just to remind you that how Southampton Village is leading in the way. Before Governor designated drones, we had already had our drones in place and we're exercising the safety. So that's a lot to be proud of with our first responders and our police department and our drone patrol. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and board.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. We will go to Trustee Simeoni.
Yes, and the last meeting, I had proposed a resolution to have the agendas approved and put on the website 72 hours in advance. And after some discussion, I'd like to thank the board and Kathy Sweeney, our village clerk, for having actually done that and having agreed to maintain this process going forward. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Also, as a license to the Southampton Cultural Center, Please be notified that there's a comedy club on July 24th and July 26th and 27th. That should be a lot of fun, and I recommend going to see it.
Excellent. Thank you, Trustee Simeoni. And we'll go to Trustee Stevenson.
Thank you, Mayor. The good news is that, as Treasurer Julie Crudup announced today, we have a $4 million surplus, which is outstanding and really is a credit to the Budget and Finance Committee, Trustee Zananti, this entire board, everybody who works in the village for managing the dollars and cents well, and doing such a good job keeping track of our budget and generating this surplus. The bad news is that if you look at what the drivers are, building permits, 1.5 million budgeted, 4 million collected, that's a lot of building going on. And we wonder why the traffic is terrible. Well, we need to continue to do everything we can. And as we discussed tonight at this meeting, this workforce housing proposal will enable people who work in the village to have a place to live so they don't have to drive here from far away, making it easier for them to live and relieving the traffic. We need to continue to look at ways to ameliorate the traffic. I know Chief Hertow is doing her best to do traffic calming measures. And I know the mayor is working with Trustee Zananti with the town and the county to look at major things that will help the traffic. But we can't continue to just keep building houses and not, we don't have enough space on the road. So that is one of the bad things about our budget surplus. I was reminded by Fire Chief Fowler that a lot of our residents are requesting speed bumps to deal with the fact that we now have so many cars in this village and they're going too fast. And as he points out, it might seem like a good idea and to slow down the traffic to have a speed bump on specific roads, but that our fire engines and police and emergency vehicles, when they need to get someplace fast and they go flying over these speed bumps, can cause a dangerous situation. And in fact, just last week, Chief Fowler called me up to say that one of the speed bumps that's recently been installed caused the driver of the fire vehicle to feel a little bit unsafe as he went over it. And he's just requesting that in future, all of those requests for speed bumps be carefully monitored and be referred to the fire department chiefs as is required by the village code. What was the other bad news? The other bad news was that, as Mr. Gobler so eloquently stated in the proposal for the PRB, the PRB is not going to solve the problem. We need a sewer. We need a sewer. And we've been talking about it for years, and I know Trustee Zananti is working on it, but we really need to be focused on dedicating and getting the people of this village, who I believe do support the overall concept of the sewer, but we need to get this done. And it's the main reason I tried to join this board 3 years ago, and we've made small progress, but we really need to get this done because we're never going to solve the lake, and we're never going to enable this village to be truly an environmental gem as it should be if we keep putting the stuff in the ground. So good news, bad news, but overall, very, very good news. And thanks to all, Julie and previous Treasurer Charlene Kegelbatz for doing such a good job putting our budget and our financial situation in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Stevenson. So I would like to just go over a few of the... Oh, sorry, Trustee Zananti. I apologize. Deputy Mayor Zananti, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As I'm settling into my new role on this board, I've met with the tree committee. I'm the liaison to the tree committee, and we reviewed the code, which basically calls for our duties. And we are looking at a bunch of issues which consider not only public but private property trees as well, which is very interesting stuff. We've talked about using technology perhaps perhaps purchasing a cheap GIS system to inventory the trees in the village by place, by size, and by tree type. All of this information will definitely be helpful as we go forward. And my secondary was meeting with the buildings department today and meeting all the staff up there and getting a glimpse as to how they run their operation, which is awesome. So thank you very much and have a good night. And thank you for recognizing me.
Thank you. I apologize. I just wanted to mention that on July 18th, I had Trustee Minardi of the Village of East Hampton come over with two of their beach managers to see Cooper's Beach. They were very envious that we were ranked number 2. I think they're 5 or 6. And he wanted to see why we were rated so highly and ahead of them. We had a great day with Matt Weeks, our beach manager, and we gave them a full tour of the operation there, and they were very impressed. But they have now extended an invitation to me, Matt Weeks, and Kathy Sweeney to go to Main Beach in East Hampton Village on August 7th to review their operations and see what we can learn from what they do there. So we thought this was a very good exchange of understanding, again, the main beaches in both villages and how they are run. On July 19th, I went to the Art and Soul at the Southampton Arts Center. Brenda Simmons was very involved with that. It was a great event right next door here. And on July 20th, I went to the J. McLaughlin store and met the CEO of J. McLaughlin, Mary Ellen Coyne, who couldn't speak more highly of the Village of Southampton and their commitment to the Village of Southampton. And there was even talk of possibly expanding in the Village of Southampton. So I was very glad to hear one of our anchor tenants here at the corner of Main Street and Job's Lane is really thriving, and was glad to meet her and others that were in attendance at that reception. Also, to just talk about some other things going on in the village, we do have a lot of grant money that the village has gotten, and as you heard tonight, we're applying for more grant money, but certainly it's great to be able to get grant money from all entities that are providing it to the Village of Southampton. We are going forward with some additional bioswales. One is at Bowden Square. Another is at Cooper's Farm, where they're going to put some shallow rain gardens in. Again, this is all for stormwater mitigation because, again, even from Bowden Square, the water that is running off there from the roads is ending up eventually in Lake Agawam. So just as the PRB is helping with some of the subsurface water, these bioswales are to help with the stormwater runoff at the surface. We are continuing with drainage projects. I've never seen so many failing drains in this village. There's one on Pierpont Street that literally is collapsing. And so we have now contracted with South Fork Asphalt to repair that drainage system. It actually was so bad at one point that the water was pouring into one of the adjoining basements of a home because the water was not draining. So these are projects that need to be done, and this is taking a lot of capital. But I'm glad that our financial fiscal health is strong because we do need to keep up with these projects and cannot let drainage systems just collapse in on themselves to the detriment of neighboring homes. So this village will continue to do drainage projects where they are essential and necessary. We also are just coming on board with a gas monitoring system. So every vehicle that goes to the barn to fill up will now have a device that records exactly which vehicle it is, which department it's from, whether it be the police department, the fire department, Department of Public Works, and we will be able to track very closely where every gallon of gas is going in this village and to which department is using it. And I'm hoping that the treasurer can help us when we do the budget next year for allocating the money specifically for the gas based on usage by those different departments so that we can more closely track how the gas is being allocated. And that goes down even to the lawnmowers. I mean, it's everything. So it's quite an extensive system, but really will be something that will give us great insight into gas usage in the village. Finally, did want to just mention some great news. Everyone may recall that we've been auctioning off some surplus vehicles in the village. So I'm pleased to report that the numbers we thought we would get from these vehicles was actually the auctioneer beat our estimates. So the 2005 Ford Escape, 2005, we thought we were going to get $200 for it. We got $900.
Nice.
The 2010 Chevy Tahoe, we thought 2010 again. That's 14 years old. We thought we'd get $1,000. We got $2,000. The 2006 bucket truck, we thought we might get $5,000 for it. We got $13,800. And the real winner here was our 20, only get $15,000 for it. We got $46,600 for it. So auctioning off these vehicles is the way to go because it generates increased revenue for the village. So I was very pleased, and Steve Phillips gave me this report today, and I wanted to especially be able to announce it to everybody here tonight because I think it's great news that we're able to auction off these vehicles and do better than we thought we would. And with that, I do have to adjourn to executive session to discuss some legal and contractual matters. So I will make the motion to do that.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you very much. And Chief, we're going to ask you to stay. He likes the landscape, not working. All right, it's 8:30 p.m. The village board is coming out of executive session. No action was taken. I am making a motion to adjourn this meeting of the Board of Trustees. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Good night.